Hello, welcome to the financial aid session for high school students. I am Robert Zasso from Dutchess Community College's Office of Student Financial Services. Now today we are going to go over financial aid in over multiple categories, and this is going to be information that you can use not only for if you're looking to apply to Dutchess Community College, but other colleges all across the country and in New York State. What we're going to do today is myself, Rachel Crepero and Mark Schaefer, they are also going to discuss with you today some of the topics. And because we're going to be going over many topics for this session, one of the things that we will have is that you can submit questions to our office so that we can answer them back to you. What you would want to do is there's going to be a link in the notification that you were sent from your high school, and in that link you can click on that and then submit the question, and then our office will get back to you.
Now, what exactly is financial aid? Financial aid consists of different fund sources provided to students and families to help pay for their post-secondary education. Students rely on what we call a cost of attendance to help determine how much their cost would be. The cost of attendance consists of direct costs, which is tuition and fees, room and board expenses, indirect costs, which include transportation, personal expenses, book expenses. And this cost of attendance, or COA, varies widely from college to college. You can have a college like Dutchess, whose cost of attendance for the 2020-2021 academic year is $13,716. As you can see in this slide, the breakdown of what the costs are that bring us to the lowest tuition in New York State. You can also have a four-year public institution whose cost of attendance can be around $30,000. In addition, a four-year private institution can have cost of attendance upwards of $50,000. The FAFSA form helps determine what is called your estimated family contribution, or EFC. This EFC is what the FAFSA form determines an amount a family can reasonably contribute to the student's education. It stays the same regardless of the college your student chooses to attend, and it consists of two components, a parent's contribution component and a student's contribution component. This is calculated obviously using the FAFSA data, which we'll go over in another session, from the application and a federal formula. Now, using your cost of attendance, or COA, and your estimated family contribution, or your EFC, is what helps determine what we call financial need. Financial aid takes your cost of attendance, subtracts your EFC, and that determines how much a financial aid office is looking to help you meet, which we call your financial need. So using the examples that I gave before, using a school such as Dutchess, which has about a $13,000 cost of attendance, and say the FAFSA determined your EFC to be about $5,000, that would leave you with a financial need of about $9,000. So using the examples I mentioned before, taking a school such as Dutchess with our low cost of attendance of $13,000 and subtracting your EFC, which in this example we'll say is $5,000, that leaves you with a financial need that our office would try and meet of $8,000. Using the example of the four-year public institution with the cost of attendance of about $30,000, you'd subtract that same $5,000 EFC, and that would leave you with a financial need of $25,000. And finally, it just keeps growing as we go to that four-year private institution with their cost of attendance of around $50,000, for example. You'd subtract that same $5,000 EFC, and you'd come up with a financial need of $45,000. Okay, what you need to keep in mind is that the cost of attendance obviously is a variable that changes, and the EFC is a constant, which would always be your figure no matter what school you attend.
What types of financial aid are available? So there's two main types of financial aid that you can apply for. There are grants and scholarships, which we refer to as gift aid or free money. This is funds that don't need to be paid back after you graduate from college. There's also loans and student employment available to students. Loans, of course, do need to be paid back 6 months after you graduate or drop below 6 credits. And then student employment doesn't actually go towards your tuition and fees. It's paid out to you in a paycheck every 2 weeks or according to the payment schedule of the school that you're going to. The different sources of financial aid are the federal government, which is through the FAFSA application. There's states that offer financial aid as well. Some colleges and universities will offer institutional aid, and there's also private sources of financial aid as well. And we're going to go into all of that in just a little while. The federal student aid programs that are available include the Pell Grant, which is the main grant through the FAFSA application. There's also the Teach Grant, which certain schools participate with. And you would want to contact their financial aid office to find out whether or not they're participating with that grant. You have SEOG, which is the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. That's a need-based grant that's available through colleges as well. You have Federal Work Study, which again, this is a program that allows you to work on campus and receive a paycheck for the number of hours that you work. The important thing to keep in mind is that it doesn't go directly towards tuition and fees. It is issued to you in a paycheck. And the other thing to keep in mind is if you're not eligible for Federal Work Study, that doesn't mean you can't work on campus. It just means that your opportunities may be a little bit more limited. Certain colleges do allow you to work as a student aid, which is just a different payment fund essentially for your work on campus. Subsidized and unsubsidized direct loans are also available through the FAFSA application. The main difference between these two loans are that for the subsidized loan, the government pays the interest while you're in school, and the unsubsidized loan, they don't pay the interest. So that interest is accruing the entire time that you're attending school from the date of disbursement. So the example that I usually give to students is that if you have a $5,000 loan and $500 of interest accrues on that loan during your time in school, then when you graduate or drop below 6 credits, you now have a $5,500 loan and you're going to be paying interest on that interest. So it's always a good idea to pay off the interest while you're in school if you're able to. PLUS loans are also available. These are loans that are generally in your parents' name. They can be applied for up to the cost of attendance, less any other financial aid that you've received, but they are contingent upon a credit check, so your parent would need to pass that in order to be eligible to receive that loan. Then the private sources of financial aid. So these are outside organizations that you can go to and apply for financial aid. You have foundations and businesses that may offer different scholarships to students going into a certain field. These are things you want to look in your community to see if there's anything available that you can apply for. The deadlines and application processes for each of these private sources would vary depending on who you're applying through. So it's important to look at all those details and submit whatever documentation they're asking for. And you want to start this process early because there's so many that are available and so many different people applying, and the deadlines are all different. You want to just make sure that you get started on that early to make sure you have the best chance of receiving something. And then finally, you have the colleges and universities themselves that offer institutional aid. And this could be based on merit, so your grades from high school or whatever the case. If you're a returning student, your grades in your previous semester at college. And then also they may have need-based aid as well, which would be based generally on either your FAFSA or a separate application that they have you fill out.
So now you've learned about federal aid and you've learned about private sources for financial aid. The next topic that we're going to talk about is New York State aid. So one thing to keep in mind, to be eligible for aid from New York State, you have to be going to a college that's in New York State. You can't go out of state. So if you go to Connecticut, New York State financial aid will not follow you there. Now, one of the big things with New York State is that there's going to be two major programs that as a student they're looking for. You have the TAP program, which is the tuition assistance program, or the aid for part-time studies, or you might hear us called APTS for short. Now, one thing with the New York State programs is that you have to apply for residency, so you have to prove those requirements. The awards can be based on merit and need. The other thing to keep in mind is that this information is going to be based off of your FAFSA. So to apply for state aid, you have a state aid application that you will need to complete, but you also, one of your beginning steps will be that you need to complete a FAFSA application. And we're going to discuss the FAFSA application a little further in the video. One of the things I like to discuss at this point in time when we're discussing financial aid is just for students to remember that you can apply for financial aid, federal and state, as a part-time student. We have a lot of students that'll go to school thinking they always need to be a minimum of 12 credits to be that full-time status, but you can actually be a part-time student and receive aid to help you go to school. So what I always recommend is that for students is that you just talk to your financial aid office, whichever college you're applying to, so let them know if you're planning to go to part-time. They can actually discuss with you what type of aid you could be eligible for. So that is one thing to keep in mind when you're looking for applying for federal and state aid. For state aid, we've talked about there's the tuition assistance program. That's if you're going to be going full-time. There's the aid for part-time studies program as a student that you could apply for if you're going to be a part-time student. You would have to check with your college to see if they have that grant, because at this time each school has to apply for the aid for part-time studies. There's also another program that came into effect in 2017 from New York State, the Excelsior Scholarship Program. So as a student, you can apply for that program. It's right now, they have it that as long as your income and your parents' income is under $125,000 off of your 2019 federal tax return, you would need to fill out an application. Those usually go live in July. So for you, you're looking at fall 2021 as a student going into college. So you'd be looking at July of 2021 when you would fill out the application. You will need to complete 30 credits in a year. So you have from the fall semester you start, you have the fall, spring, and summer sessions to complete 30 credits that are applicable to your degree program. And also one of the things about the Excelsior Scholarship to keep in mind is that you do have to live in the state of New York after you graduate from school. So if you complete your Excelsior Scholarship, you earn a bachelor's degree from school, then from there you'd have to then live in New York for 4 years before you're allowed to move out. If not, if you decide that you're going to move out after, say, 2 years, your Excelsior Scholarship, what's left over that hasn't been covered by you living in New York State, will now become a loan. It's a 10-year interest-free loan that as a student you would have to start paying back. One of the other things about the Excelsior Scholarship is it comes in 2 forms. There's the Excelsior Scholarship if you're going to a SUNY or CUNY college. It's going to be called the Excelsior Scholarship, and all of those schools we have that. Now, if you are applying to a private college in New York State, you could be eligible for what they call the Enhanced Tuition Award Scholarship, or ETA for short. And then each college, a private college, so they have to make a choice if they're going to award that scholarship to a student. So you're going to want to check with the financial aid offices to see if that is actually available for you to apply for at those schools.
Now, in order to figure out your EFC, we said that you have to apply for the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA form. This section is going to go over how to do that and some of the tips that you may want to use when filling out the FAFSA form. The FAFSA form is basically a standard form that colleges across the nation use to collect demographic and financial information about the student and the family. Again, that information goes through the financial formula and pops out your estimated family contribution, or EFC. It's filed electronically online through the website www.studentaid.gov. It is available in English and Spanish. The FAFSA can be filed anytime during the academic year, but is available on October 1st prior to the academic year for which you are applying. So for the 2021 academic year, the FAFSA form will be available on October 1st, 2020. Most colleges do set FAFSA deadlines, so you'd want to apply as close to October 1st, 2020 as possible to meet any potential deadlines. Now, the FAFSA slide that you're seeing right now is showing the application process, so you'd want to take a good look at that and make sure that you follow the process. Now, in order to fill out a FAFSA form, you must apply for what's called a FAFSA ID. This allows you to sign your FAFSA form electronically, as well as sign any other federal documents that may be required of you. It is not required, but it does speed up processing, and we highly recommend that the student apply for a FAFSA ID, and at least one parent apply for a FAFSA ID of their own as well. This ID can be used every year that you are applying for the FAFSA form, as well as used by the parent every year to co-sign your FAFSA application. Another tip that we want to strongly suggest that you use when you're filling out your FAFSA form is complete your income information using the IRS Data Retrieval Tool, or DRT. When you complete the FAFSA form, you would click on the link to use the DRT, and that would pull your information directly from the IRS and submit it onto your FAFSA form. It will authenticate your taxpayer ID, and you can choose to have that information put on your FAFSA form. This will reduce documentation requested by your financial aid office when verifying your file. Yourself, if you worked, can use the DRT, and we suggest and highly suggest that your parents use the DRT option as well. Unfortunately, some people will not be able to use the DRT based on their situation. Some examples would include if you've amended a tax return or you have parents who are married but filing separately.
When you fill out the FAFSA application, there's certain pieces of information that you need to provide in order to receive federal financial aid. The main things would be your Social Security number needs to be on the application. You need to indicate your citizenship status, any drug convictions that may be on your record. So if you were convicted of selling or receiving drugs while receiving federal financial aid, you would no longer be eligible for that aid unless you completed a rehabilitation program. Selective service registration, so males between the ages of 18 and 26 are required to register with the Selective Service in order to receive financial aid. And then you also need to list your state of legal residence on there as well. If you're a dependent student, so if you're under the age of 24, you are required to put your parent information on the FAFSA as well. And this includes their tax and income information, any other financial information that they have. If they receive any means-tested federal benefits like SNAP or WIC, their asset information, so any investments that they have, untaxed income information, and their marital status as well. The student also needs to provide similar information, so you're going to provide your own tax information and income information if you have it. If you yourself receive any of the means-tested federal benefits, any of your assets, any of your untaxed income information as well, all needs to be put onto that FAFSA in order to be eligible for financial aid. I just want to also touch on the frequent FAFSA errors that we see. So a lot of the times you want to double check your Social Security numbers because you'll transpose a number or something like that. You want to make sure that those are all correct. If your parents are divorced, widowed, or remarried, we do need the information from your step-parents as well if your parents are remarried. And the FAFSA is always asking about their current marital status. So if they're divorced from your biological parent but remarried, you do list that they're remarried. It's not divorced or separated on that application. Untaxed income, just make sure all of those numbers are correct as well. Anytime you run into an issue on the FAFSA, there is generally a little question mark there that you can click and it'll tell you exactly what they're looking for and where to find that information. You want to double check the income tax paid when you're filling out the FAFSA application, your household size, so the number of people in the household and how many people are in college. And then any real estate and investment net worth as well should be reported accurately. Once you submit the FAFSA, an institutional student information record, or what we call an ISER, is submitted to each of the schools that you list on the FAFSA. That's generally processed and sent to the schools within 10 to 14 days. Sometimes sooner than that, but 10 to 14 days is the general window that you want to give the schools to receive that information before you start asking whether or not they received it and what your package is. Once the college receives that ISER, they will review it and determine whether or not any additional information is needed from you, and they'll request that from you if they need to.
So we have just gone over the FAFSA application process. So one thing to think about the FAFSA is it's a snapshot of your income for 1 year. So one of the problems that the FAFSA has for families is now it's 2 years, the income that you were using is 2 years old. So things could have changed by the time you're applying for the fall semester. So what the federal government has done is they've given schools the ability to look at special circumstances for students for us to make decisions based on that information to help reevaluate your FAFSA application. So what I always tell students is because these things couldn't be documented on the FAFSA, you're going to want to let your financial aid office know this information. And what we're going to do is we're going to have you fill out usually what we call an extenuating circumstances application with the college, and then we're going to ask you for pieces of information to help document that. So the one thing I will tell you is be ready. They were going to ask you for a lot of different pieces of paperwork, as any financial aid office will, because we need the document. So we're going to review, ask you for that additional information. One thing to keep in mind is our decisions from the financial aid offices are final. So you there's no appealing that to like the U.S. Department of Education. So some of the different types of circumstances that students will come and talk to us in the financial aid office is there's changes in income. There could be the unfortunate change in employment status for a family. There could be unusual or medical expenses not covered by insurance. So that's another one that we see often. Change in parents' marital status. If a parents have been separated or divorced, that's something that we can look into. There could be unusual dependent care expenses, and there's also situations we have where students can't actually obtain their parents' information, so then based on that we might be able to look at their dependency status. Now, another thing to keep in mind though for colleges is that each college might be a little bit different. So where one college might be willing to look at certain parts of information and make that a reevaluation for you, other schools might say that doesn't fall under their process or policy.
So we've gone over a lot in this presentation, but there are a few key points to still remember. Grades do count for financial aid, so you want to make sure that you keep your GPA at least a 2.0 or higher, or check with your financial aid office to see what the requirements are as far as your GPA and completing credits. Financial aid and state requirements do vary by institution, so make sure that you visit your financial aid office or visit their websites for any pertinent updates. And make sure, lastly, that you fill out your financial aid form every year that you want to be considered for financial aid.
Rob, Rachel, and I would like to thank you for listening to our presentation. The slide that you see here has all of our contact information on us. Your high school is also going to send you a link to a questionnaire where you can submit questions to us as well. Thank you, and have a nice day.